See, looks like we have one person so far. Hello, Henry. Welcome.
Hello.
We're just waiting for a couple of more people to get here before we get going.
We can have a nice
We're starting a little earlier than we usually do, but that is okay. Hi, Wendy. Welcome. Yeah, if you could tell us where you're tuning in from, what brought you here today? What's a fun piece of what's a fun part of history that that you enjoy? Only those of us who are history geeks could put fun and history in the same sentence. Let's see. We're just waiting for more people to arrive. They might be coming at 7, but that's okay, because we're recording this. Well, go ahead and get started, and people will come in when they come in. Hi, everyone. If this is your first time here, I'm Omar Acevedo, and I'm the Literary Program Coordinator here at the Mark Twain House Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual program for Alexandra Petri'S U.S. History, Important American Documents. First, I want to thank our sponsors. Our virtual programs are produced in part with support honoring the late Frank Lord. We are happy to honor his memory with these programs. We are also incredibly grateful to the Wish You Well Foundation and Connecticut Public WNPR for supporting all of our virtual programs. Please consider supporting our museum by becoming a member. All members receive free admission to our author programs, such as this one, the House and Museum, year-round discounts in the store and cafe, and many more things. So I'll put a link in the chat. Take a look at that and reach out to us if you'd like to become a member. Now on to our guests. These are very short bios, which I immensely appreciate. Our author, Alexandra Petri, is a humorist and columnist for the Washington Post and author of Nothing is Wrong and Here's Why, a Thurber Prize finalist. Her satire has also appeared in McSweeney's and the New Yorker's Daily Shouts and Murmurs. And our moderator this evening is our very own Mallory Howard, who is the assistant curator here at the Mark Twain House and Museum. We encourage you to have a conversation in the chat while Mallory and Alexandra are having their conversation. If you have a specific question though, please post that directly into the Q&A section that is on the bottom left of the screen, just so we won't lose your question in the chat, which can happen. Please also know that you can click on captions to see our live auto captioning for this event. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I'll put a link in the chat to purchase Alexandra Petri'S U.S. History through our museum store. Your purchase will support our museum and our honored guest. So that is all from me. I will turn this over to Alexandra and Mallory. Enjoy.
Perfect. Thank you, Omar. So Alexandra, thank you so much for doing this with us. We're so excited to have you. I loved your book. I was in stitches.
Oh, yay.
So thank you so much for doing this for us. But to start, of course, how did this idea come to you that you decided you wanted to make this book? And can you talk a little bit about what the book is?
Sure. So, you know those books that you are given in high school where it's like, if you read these 60 sermons, you're going to understand everything you need to know about the 19th century. And I always loved those books, but I was also like, who gets to choose these? Why are these sermons and not others? And I also, like, over the course of studying history, developed grudges against particular documents. And so, like, the writings of Nathaniel Hawthorne, I really am out for bear when it comes to those. And so I'd always longed to, like, create one of my own. Plus, like, as a sort of classicist of sorts, I was a big fan of the very early histories where it's like, you know, Thucydides is sitting there being like, I wasn't at most of the things that I'm describing in my history, but I'm going to just make up some speeches that seem like the kind of thing you would say if you had been there. And I'm like, I love this energy. Why don't people get to do this anymore in our textbooks now? I mean, some people do, like Rush Limbaugh did. And I was also very inspired by his tremendous work, Rush, Revere, and the Brave Pilgrims, Rushing to History, a series in which Rush Revere is a history teacher who time travels on his talking horse Liberty. It's like oddly sensual. There's a lot going on. And I'm like, if he can do this, I can do this. And so that was sort of my inspiration.
That's amazing. Was there a period in your life where history really grabbed you for the first time? I know for me, it's a little bit morbid, but it was in 7th grade when I learned about the JFK assassination. And that's when I was off and US history had me. Was there a moment throughout your education that something really, either a person or an event in American history that grabbed you?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I feel like it was always, I was sort of steeped in it because both of my parents are also really big history buffs. Like my mom is obsessed with George Washington to a cartoonish degree. Like I always joke that if George Washington had just been murdered and you came to our house, you'd be like, oh, this woman did it, because there's just so much George Washington paraphernalia around. There's like pictures, there's masks, there's like a dog toy that looks like him. So she was always obsessed with him. And so we were always a very like, let's go to a historic home type family. Like, let's go, like, here's a book of like, what if you were a child in the American Revolution? Like, would you have enjoyed being Johnny Tremaine? Who knows? And so between that and also like, I was a very big Civil War buff, so I went to Gettysburg early, and like you got to see the fish hook, and you're like, oh, this is very interesting. At least I was like, this is very interesting. I'm not sure everyone was like, oh, we love this, but it was super cool. And some friends actually took me to a reenactment where there's this little town, I think it's called Funkstown, and they do the battle, but they do it 2 ways. So they do it once the way it actually happened, and once and they switch it so the other side won. And I can't remember who originally won, but it's like, that's wild that you can do that. I'm not sure if they still do it that way, but it was like, this is fascinating. Fascinating.
So it's like an alternate history battle type thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Choose your own adventure, which is
right.
You don't see often enough with history, I contend.
I love it. Now, I can go on and on about how many of I just love this book. It was hysterical. Do you mind reading a little something for us?
Ooh, not at all. In fact, I would love to. So, I feel bad that I started this event early, and so which feels very contrary to my nature as a human being. I'm a perennially late person, and I have a piece that explores that concept called The Hour Men, because there's been a lot written about the exploits of the Minutemen, the American civilian militias who swore to be ready at a minute to help fight the British during the Revolutionary War. And that seems made up to me, because people can't be ready in a minute. So here is a more likely account of how things would have gone. The recently unearthed diary of the most famous Hour Man, Nathaniel Hancock. June 16th, 1775, 3 p.m. The call for aid is up. Bunker Hill is going to be attacked, and we men are all being mustered. They came house to house telling everyone to get ready. Terrific, I said. It will not take me more than 1 minute to get ready. Good, Benjamin said, because we are really serious about this 1 minute thing, and we are going to be marching pretty much immediately. Absolutely, I said. This is the hour of fate. I put on my most fierce-looking coat, buttoning each button with care, and gathered all the supplies I might need. Are you ready, Nathaniel? My wife Bess inquired, glancing out the window. All the Minutemen have assembled in the square, and they're about to march. I told her that I was ready, which was essentially true, but then I remembered that we might need snacks. The Minutemen are leaving, Bess said. That is fine, I said. I am ready to go, which was true, although I was engaged in slicing carrots and placing them into a linen sack, so that if we needed to have carrots when we got to Bunker Hill, we would not have to slice them there. Nathaniel, Benjamin said, are you ready? We are marching right now, but if you are almost ready, we can wait. I am almost ready, I said. It will take me 1 minute tops to get ready. That is what you said nigh 20 minutes ago, Benjamin said. Well, I'm ready now, I said. You don't have your musket, my wife said. I am ready, I said to Benjamin. I just need to find where I put my musket. Nathaniel, Benjamin said, we cannot wait around for you to find where you put your musket if that isn't top of mind information for you right now. It is top of mind information for me right now, I said. It is definitely in the house somewhere, and I know I put it somewhere special where I would remember it. Nathaniel, Benjamin said, we are going now. I am completely ready once I find my musket, I said. I have narrowed down the location of my musket to 3 possible places. Okay, Benjamin said, we're leaving. I just need to put on my boots and grab my musket, I said. You don't even have your boots on? Benjamin inquired. I have footwear on, I said, but it occurred to me that we will probably be walking, and I'm going to want to be in boots. Yes, Benjamin said. This was all on the list I gave out earlier. I know, I said. I read the list, and I put it right next to my musket. Benjamin sighed heavily. Are you still waiting around for this guy? Somebody else said, in what I thought was an unnecessarily unpleasant tone. What you should do, my wife said to Benjamin in an urgent, soft voice that I believe she thought I could not hear, is tell him an hour earlier than you actually need him to be there. I can't do that, Benjamin said. We are Minutemen, and our whole thing is that we have to be ready in a minute to go to a location that was not previously specified. Anyway, we're going to march now, and we will have to catch up with you and your husband later. And with that, they marched off, a cloud of dust rising in their wake. June 16th, 1775, 4 p.m. I am entirely ready to leave for Bunker Hill now, but I wonder if I hadn't better wait until the morning. Probably, if the British are there, they will still be there later. If they're having a battle, I don't want to interrupt them in the middle of it, which I imagine would be pretty awkward. They might already be firing their muskets, and they might not know that it was I, Nathaniel Hancock, arriving with carrots and other assorted forms of aid and succor, and they might do something they regretted. Bess thinks I'd better go because people will pass remarks, but if they win, that will prove that my presence was not necessary, and if they lose, it will be a relief that I was not there. She does not wish them to think me a coward. She would not think me a coward, she explained, but other people might think it. Anyway, I'm leaving now as soon as I put on my boots. June 17th, 1775, 7 p.m. I have just gotten back from Bunker Hill. It was a little awkward as I ran into everyone on the road as they were coming back. I had only gotten about halfway there when I saw a great column of dust coming down the road. It was everyone who had set out, mostly, although some of them had wounds they did not have before, and I did not see Benjamin at all. I tried to blend into the group because that seemed less disruptive than waving them down and having to explain where I'd been. I fell into step and marched along with them as unobtrusively as I could. A newspaper writer came and asked us about the recent engagement, and I said loudly, Bunker Hill was the spot. I will never forget being there at Bunker Hill. What a battle the Battle of Bunker Hill was. And then I offered him a sliced carrot. Everyone around me was looking at me, and after the writer left, they made some very stinging remarks about how if I had been at the engagement, I would know that it was at Breed's Hill and not at Bunker. There was really nothing to say after that, and the march back into town was quite long. I'm not sure if I'm welcome in the Minutemen any longer.
That's incredible. I absolutely love, that's one of my favorites, along with, of course, John and Abigail Adams, which I loved. Can you talk about how you came up with some of these ideas for these documents? Did they just pop into your head? Did you do a little research? How did that work?
Well, sometimes it would be like, I'd just been roosting on an idea for years. Like with the Minutemen, I've always been like, you can't get ready in a minute. I have a bone to pick with this. And with the other ones, I did a bunch of research, like Cotton Mather, actually. I sort of went down a rabbit hole that became like all consuming, and my mind was full of nothing but Cotton Mather, which was a sort of a strange place to be. And I kept just like, there's a lot of Cotton Mather content out there, and it's all pretty wild. And he had all these books like mystery, like I think like Mysterious Providences of the Invisible World, or like I might be combining two titles of Cotton Mather works, but anyway, where he just like goes to people's houses and is like, yep, it's witchcraft. And so I was like, what can I do with this? And so then I'm like, often another thing that would help would be trying to think of two great tastes that would go great together, hopefully. And so I was like, we need to have some kind of ghost hunting situation here. So then I watched a bunch of ghost hunting shows, including there's this amazing show called Paranormal Home Investigators, which is like, they just go through and they're like, it's probably your door is broken. It's not actually a ghost, which is a vibe I love. But then they have somebody who comes in and is like, it's a ghost, it's a ghost. But anyway, so a lot of it was like, or this, one of my favorite chapters is the Sesame Street Special D-Day episode, because
Yes.
I was like, well, Sesame Street loves to have letter-themed days, and what historic day is more letter-themed than D-Day? And so then that involved a lot of like, let's consume some Muppet content. Let's really get as much Muppet voice as we can. And then let's also watch a lot of like, here we are storming the beaches, and this unholy mixture can combine to produce some sort of chapter.
There's no such thing as too much Muppets. You gotta work them in somehow. So I'm glad you were able to do that. Now, another question I had is, how much research did you do for this? How accurate did you want to make it?
I did a bunch of research, and I also I hired a fact checker, which she was like, but why? Why would you hire me? This book says on like the label that it's all made up. And I was like, well, because I want to be like basically accurate within like the jokes. So, and she came back with a lot of helpful stuff. Like she was like, the time that it's taking for John and Abigail Adams to send these sexts back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean is incorrect. It is much too quick. They would never have been able to get their salty correspondence back and forth that way. So then I went through and I changed the dates, but then John Adams was no longer abroad. And so I'm like, well, I'll change it back. And so now I just have a note in the back apologizing to any like time travelers who are trying to use the book as a resource to give them a good sense of how long it takes a letter to get from one point to another. And she was also like, some of the stuff that Cotton Mather is citing is not actually incidents he was at in person, it's other things. And there's a chapter where it's Nixon just yelling at his little dog Checkers, just like his Nixon tapes. And Checkers had apparently perished by that time. So RIP Checkers. And so I have several little notes about it being like, I apologize for these 3 things that I know are inaccurate, but I look forward also to receiving more emails from people who know the history and have found even more sources for disagreement.
Well, I'm sure she had a blast. I can't imagine a more fun job as a fact checker than going through your book. That would have just been a great time. I wish I was a fact checker for that. So another question that I had, or were there any documents or stories that you had to cut because of the length or anything like that that you wish you could have included?
Well, so there was one that I really wanted to do something with the Millerites. I'm obsessed with them. They're this like sort of millennial cult, not like millennial in the sense that I'm a millennial and I love my avocado toast and boy, this mortgage is sure inconvenient, but like millennial in the sense that like they were expecting the world was going to be ending. But they made the mistake of picking a specific date, which I just think is very funny. And then everybody really sort of roasted them for it. Because they got rid of their worldly goods and they're expecting the savior to show up, and they're just sort of that, of course, the world is still going as far as we can tell. And so it was very disappointing for them. So I tried doing like an event RSVP where people were like, hey, and they just kept moving the date back and like sending like a notice to like all the attendees, but it wasn't quite working. And so I would basically send these big sheafs of documents to my editor, and he'd be like, so these are 5s, this one's a 3, and that one kept being a 3. So maybe someday, if there's ever a volume 2, I can whip the Millerites into shape.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I hope that you might do a volume 2 someday, because I think that would be amazing. If you did a volume 2, would you stick with US history, or do you think you'd maybe go international?
I think that would be fun to go international, because I kept being like, oh, I guess I can't do T.S. Eliot. And then I was like, oh no, he was American. He just really wanted to sound like he was British.
Right.
So there are a lot of people where you're like, oh, I guess, yeah, this person was like stealthily American. Or like, I did do Raymond Chandler, and he was British, but he like moved here. So I'm counting him. Plus he was all LA all the time. So that feels like a strong vibe. No, but I would love to do one where I could do like some Victor Hugo content, because I feel like he's the Herman Melville of abroad, where he keeps interrupting the book to be like, here are some fun facts I found about the sewers, whereas Melville will be like, here's some fun facts I found about whales and only whales. I feel like the two of them together could have written like an extremely long, very inaccurate book. And I for one would have enjoyed reading that very long, very inaccurate book.
Yeah, see, the ideas are already coming. So I think you have to do it. Now, making it a little bit more specified to the Mark Twain House. I know Mark Twain makes an appearance in the book. as Mark Twain the Undead, which I'm a sucker for details. And I noticed right away that you seem to be parroting his autobiography at the very beginning when you mentioned, and I loved it. I was like, oh my God, she's using it just how he did the autobiography. So I love that little detail as a Twain nerd. But how did you come up with, did you know the quote already and figure, oh, that's a great jumping off point? What made you come up with the Twain story of him being a zombie?
So I knew the quote. There were a lot of things where like my jumping off point was a quote. Like there's this whole section where Edison is like having other ideas. It's just like, because he said the genius was like 1% inspiration and 100% perspiration, or 99% perspiration. That's not 100 by math. But and so I thought it'd be funny if he were just very sweaty, and I wrote a piece with that concept. But with Twain, I know that like the whole like reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. It struck me as very funny. And I also was sort of inspired by his early sort of travelogues. I loved Roughing It. I'm still trying to make my way through Innocents Abroad. He's like wandering around the Parthenon right now. He like broke in at night and then he got back on the boat, and that's where I left him. And it's sort of like, I can see why at the time people were really digging it, but I'm also just like, this man on the boat needs to stop telling him anecdotes. But like the way he does a little preview of the section in his autobiography and in his little more autobiographical tales. So I thought it would be fun to do something in that vibe. And then the editor was like, you realize like most people, like the Twain that you read is not Innocents Abroad or Roughing It. Most people are reading like Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, and calling it a day. And I'm like, well, too bad. But it's my party. But he's one of those like styles where like you can really tell if you're getting it wrong. So I hope it was like passable.
No, I think it was great. I think you did a great service to his voice, and I could see him coming through that. So I think that's perfect. It's funny because when I was reading it, I thought if Alexandra ever did an international one, you'd have to do some sort of Twain Austen mashup because he hated her so much.
Yeah.
Like it would be great to see the two of them kind of come together in some way.
Yeah, what did he say about her? I'm trying to remember.
He said it's a pity they let her die a natural death. And then he said after reading Pride and Prejudice, he wanted to dig her up and beat her over the skull with her own shin bone. So yeah, not a Jane Austen fan by any stretch of the imagination.
Wow. Because I knew that Charlotte Bronte was out for Bear, where she was like, it's like a beautiful portrait of a commonplace face. And that's like the only Jane Austen burn I have memorized. But I love the like, yeah.
He has several Jane Austen burns. I'll have to send them to you. You will really enjoy yourself.
Yeah, no, because everybody, I feel like they're also like, people are doing like Pride and Prejudice and zombies, and she keeps getting remixed in interesting ways. And I feel like he could get in on that somehow.
Oh, definitely. And that's what I love about your book too, is I think that this is also a great way to get young people more involved in history and to kind of make it fun and humorous. And have you gotten any feedback about, kind of the younger audience gravitating towards this? Because I think it's fantastic to kind of hook students into it and want them to learn more about, actually what happened to these people.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope it's a book that like, it's inaccurate in a way that makes you want to learn more history.
Right.
I have a friend who claims that one of her friends is a history teacher and bought a bunch of them for her classroom before realizing they were not a real textbook. But I hope they're still in the classroom because I think if you're into it, because like the way I learned a lot of history early on was like there's these books called Horrible Histories, and I would just go through those, and that's like how I learned about the measly Middle Ages, as the book called them, or the terrible Tudors or the slimy Stuarts. And you can pick up a lot of information if it's gently handed to you wrapped in jokes, as opposed to dryly presented to you with a series of charts. Although there are charts also, if you dig charts, there's a whole section in the Erie Canal chapter full of charts about spookiness and so forth.
I was about to say, I especially love the Where's Walden section.
Yay!
So those of you that are joining us tonight, please purchase the book, which Omar has put in the link, and you can go and search for Walden yourself. I love that. How did you come up with that idea?
Well, a lot of it's just like I come up with an idea. I'm like, this is either very stupid or my favorite idea ever. And Where's Walden was one of those things where I'm like, this is very silly, but I'm committed to it. And I started drawing it myself. And then I was like, no, I need an actual talented illustrator. And fortunately, one of my friends knew Ursula Miller, and she was able to step in and draw out the rest of it in a beautiful and detailed way. Especially because like Thoreau said so many strange little things about like, here's a man sitting on a pumpkin who's delighted, and here's the mass of men living lives of quiet desperation. And I'm like, this sounds like a Where's Waldo puzzle to me. I just want to see this mass of men like being quiet and desperate, and this pumpkin guy, and this man on a rich velvet cushion who's crowded and unhappy, and all of the
It's so much fun to see what's in the background of it.
No, and having like been to Walden, it's cool. It's like I feel like I expected it would be farther from things than it was. And also once I learned the thing about his mom was ostensibly providing some laundry support, which does not come through clearly in the writing. I'm like, this guy, but he had a lot of very, very cool ideas. I don't want to pounce on Thoreau unnecessarily.
Well, speaking of imagery, I love the cover of your book, which if those of you can see what it looks like, and I love that you're there behind Washington. Did you have any input when it came to the cover design, or were you kind of surprised and they just unveiled it to you?
I mean, they unveiled it, but they got it exactly right. So I was like, I love this. This is wonderful. Because I did sort of say, like, there is a whole genre of fake history book where you're crossing the Delaware, and usually like the author is in the place of George Washington. So I like that I'm like behind him, in the place of Monroe, instead of myself driving the boat. I know there's like, if you go on Amazon and you look through political humor, there's usually like up to 5 books that have some variant of George Washington crossing the Delaware on the cover. Not that I've like been stalking the section at all, but I somewhat have been. And so it's also funny because my like now 17-month-old, she'll go, mama, and she'll point at the book cover. I'm like, don't get used to this, because
it's pretty impressive though. I mean, you're in good company, you and George Washington. I'm sure your mom is pleased.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. She's like, I was expecting there'd be more George Washington in the book. And I'm like, well, it's a couple of times. She's like, well, I think he deserved more. But I'm like, well, it's not, people haven't heard about George Washington. He's an underdocumented fellow. So
that's right.
I wanted to give John Adams a shake instead.
I'm glad you did that. Were there any parts, chapters that you found more difficult, that you kind of struggled with a little bit and it took maybe longer to work out?
Well, there was some so I really wanted to do like some kind of Shirley Jackson thing, and her style is so hard to like get into your system because she has this really uncanny way with her sentences where the balance is like there's sort of almost like a physics to them that's really hard to capture, where like you think the weight's going to be in one place and then it keeps going and it lands in another place, and it's this weird rhythm, like, which is very cool and very unsettling and like super useful to her as a horror writer when she chose to be a horror writer. But when you're trying to like do something that can pass as that, is very challenging to sort of hop onto. So I spent a lot of time like reading, like I read like Hangs a Man, which is just a wild book. Like midway through, just a new character shows up out of nowhere, then the protagonist disappears. It's just like, sure, this all might as well be happening. But it's like, it's very unsettling throughout, but it's also like, who's this new character? You can't do that. But maybe there wasn't, maybe I'm misinterpreting it. The disadvantage of reading books as an adult is you don't have somebody there being like, no, you've misinterpreted this. And in fact, that was not a new character. That was like a euphemism for the genitalia of Lady Chatterley. Or whatever it is that's happening. So like trying to like read enough Shirley Jackson to sort of get the rhythm right, that was a struggle. Also, yeah, Cotton Mather was a struggle because I knew I wanted him in there and I wasn't sure how. And the biggest, so one that I kept having issues with was one of the catalysts for wanting to do the book was that I just had a bone to pick with the Jonathan Edwards "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God" sermon, which to me symbolizes like everything that these tomes are full of. It's just like, oh yes, here's like the the 18th century sermon that will drive you off your gourd, or early 19th century. My dates. But so, and I kept doing different versions of this, and they kept not working. So the first was like, look under your chair, you may already be a sinner. And that didn't work. And the second one, I was like, well, here's an idea. What if the Obama-Clinton-Edwards debates had been the Obama-Clinton 18th century preacher Jonathan Edwards debates? And amazingly, that was not a successful concept. Somehow it just really, really did not land. And then the final one I came up with was like, what if we just hear from the spider? And that's the one that's in there. I'm going to keep throwing spaghetti at the wall until something emerges that in that section. That was.
So we're getting a little bit close to time. So if you have questions, if you could start putting them in the Q&A box. We'll be doing questions in a couple minutes. So get those questions ready, put them in the Q&A, and we will get to them in just a moment. Now, another one that I loved, I want to kind of ask you about a couple in particular. My favorites is I cackled over the Emily Dickinson doing the Family Feud. So can you talk a little bit about that in particular? Because I'm amazed how you came up with that. I think it's so smart and so funny. And how did you come up with that?
Well, I love Emily Dickinson. She's just like such a great poet. Like, we're so lucky to have her as a country. I just think she's terrific. But she also has like the wildest, just the things that she came up with, the things that she's like, this is a normal thing to say, and I'm going to say it. Just like the capitalization, the punctuation. She was doing it all. She loved M dashes. At one point I was joking, like, maybe the M dashes were just where her editors just cut out curse words, and she was just like swearing throughout the poems, and it was just like, no. But so I also watched a lot of Family Feud, like that, both with like the old host who used to just like kiss all the contestants on the mouth, which was like slightly awkward, and with Steve Harvey, who just stands there and reacts for like a minute to whatever's going on, and with this one genius man, who was my favorite contestant of all time, and they were like, what follows pork? And he said, cupine. And I was like, this man is incredible.
Stop, that is my favorite Family Feud moment.
It's so good.
So good.
He was, living in 3001, yes. And we were all trailing behind him. But anyway, so I'm like, Emily Dickinson would just be herself fully on this show. Do you ever play the game where you're like, which of my family members would I absolutely not want to take on Family Feud because she'll just be doing her own thing? I feel like Emily Dickinson is that, but in the course of just doing her own thing, she might come around to get a few answers correct. And so,
I have to tell you, I figured you'd appreciate this. After reading your book, I actually had a fever dream one night of that very story that you wrote of Emily Dickinson on Family Feud, but there were other historical figures on her team.
Oh my God.
Playing like European writers, and it was amazing.
Who else was there? That's an incredible dream.
It was Emily Dickinson, of course, Mark Twain, because always in my brain.
Yep.
I think Nathaniel Hawthorne, Louisa May Alcott, and I think Ralph Waldo Emerson was my fifth. That was my team.
Wow,
it was an interesting how they try to come up with answers together, but your book was so funny and interesting that I actually dreamed about it. So thank you for that.
Wow. Yeah, I can picture them all being like, good answer, supportively to one another.
Supportive, some not so much. So it was kind of a mixed bag, but
that's amazing. That's way better than I like A, that's like such a fun dream, and B, like, oh, I don't know, what a nice thing to happen for the book.
Exactly. So I highly recommend to all of you to purchase this, because hopefully you'll have dreams like mine. It is hilarious. It spans our entire history with all different historical figures. Do you have a few, top 3 figures in US history that you really gravitate towards?
Ooh, I love, like, Abraham Lincoln is somebody I always think is like fascinating, especially like the tales of his early courtship. There is this like historical novel that came out relatively recently called like Courting Mr. Lincoln that I very much enjoyed. It's like basically accurate. Like you could tell that the author had done his research, where but there's some historians who were like, yeah, like Lincoln, he just was not super able to express his thoughts and feelings in a way that kind of backfired. Like one he was like, I'm going to break up with Mary Todd. I'm going to tell her it's over. And then he's like, I'm going to go do it in person though, because that's the right thing to do. And he went and did it in person, but then she cried and he freaked out and he was like, oh, never mind, let's get engaged, which I'm like, I sympathize with this awkwardness. Plus he had all these like wild, like fart jokes that I feel like, of the historical figures with like the amount of gravitas that he had, like the fart joke ratio is tremendously high. Like there's one of my favorites is I'm gonna do it. It's captive audience. We're gonna tell the Lincoln farting joke. But there was this guy, it's called the farting turkey carver, where there was a man who was like famed for his quick wit, and he's carving a turkey. And the second he starts to carve, he emits an enormous fart, and the whole company falls silent. And they're like, what's this man going to do? And all eyes turn on him to try to figure out how's he going to get himself out of this. And so he starts, he sharpens the knives carefully. He rolls up his sleeves. He addresses himself to the turkey and he says, now, let's see if I can't carve this turkey without farting, which I really like that. And amazingly did not make it into the Lincoln movie, which I think was a huge omission on their part. They kept the like and shitting story, but they didn't have the farting turkey carver. That one's just for me. But yeah, so he's a big fun one. I also like Richard Nixon is fun and weird. And Herman Melville, just he's all over the place, loves whales, and I love that.
That's great. Those are good answers. So we're just reaching time to start wrapping up. I don't see any questions yet, but this is your reminder. If you have questions, this is kind of your final last call to get them in before we close it for the night. Now, something I always like to ask people when we do these virtual conversations are, what are some, especially with you being a humorist, what are you reading right now? I always like to get a sense of, and do you read a lot more after you finish writing a book? Do you kind of want to take a break from reading, writing, that sort of thing?
Well, the funny thing is, since being on book tour, because book tour means essentially you just go from great bookstore to great bookstore all around the country. And as somebody who has real difficulty going into a bookstore and leaving without buying a book, it was just like, well, I'm going to have to read more than I've ever read in my life. So I've been reading a lot this year, actually. I read this very fun, strange history of the 19th century sort of utopian movements called An Assassin in Utopia, I think, by Susan Wells, which the Post Review described it as, they're like, this is a good book, but it keeps interrupting the narrative with fun facts about P.T. Barnum. And I was like, sold. I wish to read this book. And it does do that. It does keep interrupting the narrative with fun facts about P.T. Barnum. And then I also I've been reading Stephen King because I hadn't read any Stephen King, and I'm just like, let's see what this guy has to say. And it turns out he's a pretty good writer. He really knows how to turn those pages and create scenarios. So I've been enjoying that. And what else have I been reading? I've been reading this.
You talked about how you were tackling Innocents Abroad.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. But I've been tackling that for so long, it almost doesn't count. It's part of the substratum of my nightstand, as opposed to like the active books that I'm still reading. Like it's become slate or shale at this point. It's no longer a book. It's just been pressed in there. There's like fossils of, old...
we all have that bookshelf in our homes that we kind of go back to every once in a while. Yeah. We do have a couple questions. So I want to make sure we get to them. So first we have, how can you make the Supreme Court funny?
Oh man, well, I think they've already made themselves ridiculous. So, but without necessarily being funny, because it's like, that certainly is an awful lot of power to be wielding to make people's lives miserable. And it doesn't seem, not a big fan of the ways they're wielding it. So I guess, but sometimes there'll be like a palpably absurd statement like when Justice Thomas was like, my favorite thing to do is be in like a Walmart parking lot. I love that for vacation above all other things. And then it turns out he has been, in elaborate yachts, like having photorealistic portraits done while he's like catered to by staff. And it's like, okay, so you wish you were in a Walmart parking lot, huh? So every so often you could like find a specific thing and try to use that. But I don't know. They may be impervious to shame at this point. So at least it'll just be other people can be yelling at the internet with me.
That is true. Let's see. Do you have any favorite political humor books and any serious history books or books you used to inspire you while you were writing?
Ooh, I've been really enjoying Not Funny by Jenna Friedman lately. That's like a political humor book. And history books that I was using to inspire me, well, a lot of it was like getting to go back to weird primary sources that I, for whatever reason, not gotten to. So like The Jungle, I'm really glad I got to actually read The Jungle. You don't see a lot of young Uptons wandering around anymore, and I think that's a shame. But I do think the problem with The Jungle that I had was that I kept thinking, similar to when I read Lolita, spoilers for Lolita, I guess, that I kept thinking that the main character was going to get turned into sausage, and then he didn't. So I rectified that in my content for the book. But I did keep reading and be like, when's he going to be sausage? Like, we've only got 20 pages and he's become a socialist and he seems very happy and like he's succeeding at life. Where's the sausage, coming in? So that was fun to read going in. And what else? Now I'm getting to return to Walt Whitman's large oeuvre was a lot of fun, especially trying to couple it with Barbie and so forth.
Right. This other question, which I really agree with, will Mark Twain as a zombie be a novel one day?
Yeah, I would love to write a novel one day, but I feel like I couldn't do Mark Twain for the length of a novel.
For a whole, that would be
he's
tough.
more of a sprint than a marathon. Also, like, how do people run marathons? Anytime I'm like, I don't understand it. I'm in awe of it. I can understand, like, if your army had just won a battle and you really needed to tell people the outcome of that battle, like maybe running 26 miles. But other than that, I don't know. I don't know that I could do it. But yeah, no, but please say in the comments what type of novel you would like me to write, because I'd love to write one. And otherwise, it's going to be a children's book about socks. And, that could be fun too. But yeah.
Leads to another question of mine is, do you have any ideas brewing for a next book project that you can chat about, or are you kind of taking a break and think about that at a later date?
I was sort of roosting on a bunch of ideas, because it's also like any long project is one that you get to spend a lot of time with. And it's sort of, you want to go like try to pick a project where the verb stays get as opposed to have as long as possible. So you're like, oh, I get to do this. I get to do this. And then only in the last, quarter of the marathon are you like, I have to do this. And this one was like that. I really enjoyed getting to spend time with all of these historical folks and documents and, poking and prodding this way and that. So I want to find something that will be as fun to spend time with. I also would kind of like to try something that's like, it's got a plot maybe. So who knows? Anyway, so trying to figure out, and I also this is just, now I'm rambling, but I love utopian fiction, because I feel like everyone's always writing dystopian fiction, but I would love to read something that's set in a world where everyone's, all of the problems have been resolved and people are just having interpersonal conflicts while a replicator makes all their food and they have a nice time. I
would read it.
So I was trying to think of either horror or utopianism, I think, are the two directions that I'm being pulled in.
I would love that. I would read it. So you already have one person that is all for that. But so we're wrapping up, because I know we have only a couple minutes left. Thank you for doing this. We really appreciate it. One of my final questions is, have you ever visited the Mark Twain House in Hartford?
I have, when I was 11, I think. It was so cool. I really want to go back. I was like,
have to come back. We've grown and expanded, so we'd love to have you come back. P.T. Barnum also is from Connecticut. So, I mean, you have multiple reasons to come visit us. So whenever you work on that horror or utopian novel, whenever that comes out, we expect that you're going to come visit us.
Yeah,
on your bookstore. But I just want to thank you again. Please, if you have not ordered it already, please go follow the link in the chat and get a copy of this book. It is hilarious. It will cause you to have great fever dreams, as I can attest to. And it's just a really, really great time. It's really smart. It's really funny. So Alexandra, thank you again for setting aside time to talk to us about your amazing book. And I really appreciate it. And that's all from Hartford.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Make sure you check out marktwainhouse.org for any upcoming events. Omar, any last words to add before we sign off for the night?
No, I think you got everything. Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you, Mallory, for acting as moderator this evening.
You're very welcome. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.